Thanks, James. Thanks, Roger. Thank you all for being in this wonderful, crowded place. And thank you all on Zoom. I wish I could see you, but
Yeah.
I'm going to introduce the poets just before they read, which is not necessarily the Grolier tradition, but that's what I'm going to do. And they're going to read in alphabetical order. So, our first poet tonight is John Hodgen. I met John many years ago when we read together at, I believe, the Brookline Library.
That's right.
Yeah.
He was reading from his first book, In My Father's House, and I loved it, beginning with the biblical title and continuing through its irreverently witty poems. The book won the Bluestem Award, and his next three books were also prize winners of the Balcones Prize, the Donald Hall Prize, and the Massachusetts Book Award. He's also won a slew of other prizes, including the Grolier Prize, a Mass Cultural Council Award, the Chad Walsh Prize, and a Collins Award. Really? Didn't know about that. I should note that he's the writer in residence at Assumption College, where I met up with him a couple of years ago. At the time, he was looking forward to his sixth book, and it was published just last April, and he will be reading from it tonight. What May Be is a whirlwind of a book. In the foreground is often a person known to the poet or not known. In the background, the events of our time, COVID, hurricanes, refugees, with history's horrors mixed in. And although the book is personally elegiac and globally troubled, it's one of the wittiest and most virtuosic books I've read in a long time. Filled with breathlessly long lines and a continuous mashup of contemporary events and situations, absurdly funny poems, puns, and centuries hopping literary and historical references. At the core, these are very moving poems. I'm sorry, I can't see up here. At the core, these are very moving poems, countering our social ills with deep caring as well as wise wit. What do we do in these terrible times? Let's start by listening to John Hodgen.
It's so awesome. It's like a game of Twister. You get to know people.
Hear this all right? We good? I start thanking people or smiling at people who'll be here all night. So I'm going to try to just read some poems if that's okay. I love just about everybody here. And if I haven't met you yet, I'll love you after. Thanks, Martha. I can't even begin to thank you enough. Read a poem called Plague. Catchy title.
Yeah.
I used to teach AP English, and there was a class, and then it became 2 or 3 or 4 years in a row, a class of really, really gifted kids who, in one particular case, they wanted the worst of what we do instead of the best. They wanted to read a book that was after that. And I loved them. They stood up to the school from time to time and protested things that were worth protesting. And I think they get us through these times when we don't know what to do either. But to teach, to read the plague, and then know that we had one coming our way too, gave birth to this poem. Taught the plague for 20 years in L'étranger by Albert Camus. To AP students who loved ennui and absolutes, one group in particular who loved the plague so much, they pestered the French teacher, Mademoiselle Courchaine, whom they sang about derisively and on cue to the tune of Eric Clapton's Cocaine, into teaching it to La Peste, just so they could read it again. Double down, OD on their pain.
Mm.
And who asked me to promise to teach them the worst that we do, not the best. We smoked clove cigarettes, listened to the Smiths, the Cure, and who snapped fingers for what they approved. Nurses, Kafka, Nietzsche, Sartre, who craved for a shimmering moment amidst their daily afternoon art. The calibrated and careful cuttings of their wrists.
Mm.
To be their school's journalists, stigmatists, existentialists, their walking, talking Schindler's Lists, tempest tossed, their one-day cafeteria hunger strike for the victims of the Holocaust. Their duct tape mouths protesting censorship of the school newspaper. They're suspending their disbelief about living forever. Who knew we all were the plague, but willed themselves immune each day for 45 minutes or so, inhabiting Oran and the quarantine, who knew both Maman and Meursault, and who built in their Monet hearts an impression, a mini cathedral at Rouen, and loved us all despite ourselves and for ourselves in our ruin.
Mm.
Speaking of an old one for a professor I miss, he passed away recently, and he used to come in and help me teach peace studies class. I'm nervous, I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
No.
Um, Page 7, right where I left it, yeah. He went to Vietnam and he commanded riverboats, much like you would have seen if you know Apocalypse Now,
Yeah.
that horrifying way of learning war the way they did in that film, but he was one of those captains.
Mm.
And this has one of those appallingly unapologetic puns that Martha was talking about, so wait for it. It's called High Tide. A man I know named Waters commanded riverboats during the war in Vietnam. He drilled through the heart of the Mekong. Now he teaches peace studies to wide-eyed kids, the arc of his life having turned him this way, utterly, as if by design. They stare at him, silent as fish. He says he is casting his nets. He says power corrupts, peace through strength. He says Merv, CETO, NATO, mad. He says new submarines, launching platforms, multiple warhead killing machines, Ohio class. Ohio so centered, so far from the sea, except in the Ice Age, the glacial moraine. The new Ohio's under ice caps again, circling the world smoothly, almost silently. He says there are things he cannot say. He says, expiate. His eyes fill up. He turns away. And this man with whom I am comfortable kayaks in the summer all over the world, in Alaska, the Aleutians, where Inuits since the Ice Age have hunted whales the size of submarines. And he has married a woman from Ohio, whom he loves more than he can say, even loving her name, Edith, a name that doesn't sit well among popular women's names.
Oh, wow.
You're good. I can't tell you how long I've been waiting for. Even loving her name, Edith, a name that doesn't sit well among popular women's names, a name she herself doesn't like, but one that he loves just because it is her name. I tell him he's the only man I know who can have his kayak and Edith too. Like a fish out of water, I tell him, like Onitsura's haiku. He smiles, says sometimes he flips his kayak deliberately over and over in the Bay of Fundy, turning the fragmented world on its axis again and again, smoothly, almost silently, world into water, water into shimmering light.
Hmm.
I really like what you said about the new book. I'm going to step away from that, believe it or not. I intend to read that new book. I intend to read that myself. I want to read a newer poem that isn't out yet. New Ohio Review likes it a lot, and I'm going to wait for them to let me know, but it's coming. It has the longest title I've ever written for a poem. And I'm nervous about this one. Let me know afterwards. Poem for Emily Dickinson, referenced twice in Sophie's Choice, and for Sophie, of course, hounded, tormented on the train platform at Auschwitz by the Nazi SS commandant into deciding which of her two children she has to give over, consigned to the gas chambers in order to save the other. How she chooses, as she must, as any of us would, despite what we say, saving one at least from the flames, thinking cold, so cold, like glaciers, the rivers of our lives, suddenly shifting. And for Sophie's nameless ESL instructor at Brooklyn College after the war, saying at the end of class, soon you will all be speaking English in your sleep. And quoting Emily's poem about death kindly stopping for us. And for Sophie's classmate, whom Sophie asks to tell her the poet's name again, who says, Emile Dickens. But most of all, this poem is not for, is decidedly against the assistant librarian, the shame of all librarians, the condescending, supercilious prig who tells Sophie she must mean Charles Dickens, the 19th century British novelist, that there is no such poet as Emile Dickens, causing Sophie to faint dead away on the library floor. That's the title. And it's longer than the poems. Plead with me. Pray for the real Emile Dickens, unknown novelist, poet, autodidact, that he be found, called from the lost regions of the unimagined dead, with all due speed, by acclamation. May he be remembered for saying that truth and death are the same woman disrobing in heaven and also in hell. May he be hailed as laureate, as Sophie's last choice. May his every word be revered, his magnum opus, the chosen one, be rediscovered. Each word a new child with a soup bowl only asking for more. May he know no shame, no dereliction. May his ranks never close. May he have all new clothes. May he be lauded for leaving his bleak house, his hard times, for enduring all of our twists, for exceeding our greatest expectations. May death itself die like John Donne, like bloody Keats, hapless Chuzzlewit, or faithful Macabre. May it be that death's heartless heart yearns. May death die in a library sumptuous, vast as Parnassus among copper fields and forests of urns. May he die hearing there is no such author as life, that life is pure fiction, a story, a poem, that he must venture alone into a book depository, where presidents and dreams are killed, where everything burns. And may there always be a poet named Emily or Emile, waiting at a train station, another train coming in, how it chuffs and begins, how one might glance out a window for just a moment askance to see someone feverishly and forever beating the dickens out of a poem. The way Dylan dropped the lyrics to Subterranean Homesick Blues on oversized hand-lettered cards, with Allen Ginsberg standing in an alley in London outside the Savoy Hotel, where words and worlds coincide, with everyone we've ever loved and everyone who's died. Carriages pulling up beside the station outside, hundreds of them, millions, on which we can ride.
Mm.
I've got two short ones. Can I do that? Okay. I hope you've all read The Little Prince when you were a kid, or read it again when you were a bigger kid.
Yeah.
And I hope you know, I imagine you do, that Antoine de Saint-Exupéry died in World War II on a reconnaissance mission. He talked his way into the army. He was too old, but he wanted to fly for the war effort. And on his very last mission, he disappeared. He just never came back. And do you all know the poster of the galaxy or the universe that has the big yellow sign that says "You are here"?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good. If wishes were roses, if roses were stars. Tonight, with all that remains of my heart, I want to find the missing plane of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I want it without the slightest concern or word about any award or frond of fame or exuberant frippery which might arise for being known worldwide on X as the discoverer of, or the one who finally found. I want it for my own reasons, my own fool's errand, for the way I want all our lost dreams to be found, rescued, recovered, for all our empty hands, our holy hearts, each a night flight reconnaissance plane that eternally loops and swirls around this universe, looking for us without ever coming home again. Look for them. For every heart stacked up in holding patterns, like ribbons or scarves that intertwine across solar systems and boundless galaxies, bright rivers of stars, nebulas, like a giant infinity sign, a golden helix, a million-mile mural of our eternal longing, that you are here, a directional sign in which we can see ourselves sometimes from our fearful city lights, or revel in when we're coming in for a landing. Home, home, we say. The world's lights left on, waiting for us by whatever God or devil in disguise there is who owns all our lives, who's heard every jot and tittle of every prayer we've ever said, each a dead pilot or sleeping little prince. See the dream lifting like a crown floating above his head. Oh world, oh love, oh heart, I will be looking for you long and long and long after I am dead.
Mm.
Last one, my wife, God bless her, sitting in the back, and when you're young, you do the dumbest things. After Kent State, we decided to drive to Washington, D.C. and participate in the protest and drive back again the same night, which was stupid. I almost killed us. I went across a couple of lanes when I was nodding off, but I saw something at that rally and it's just been haunting me, and I just want to share it with you. It's a sonnet. It's going to rhyme and all in it. So it's just something, I think maybe you'll know it already too. It's called Weltschmerz, Poem for the Great Divide, and it's written out of the results of the last election. Tonight, with all that's happening outside, all that's being broken, denied, all that's slithering, roiling on the underside, all that must be decried, I'm remembering a young Black man who allowed himself to be tied to a cross, to be hoisted up at a protest rally in 1970 in Washington against the killings at Jacksonville, Kent State, along with Nixon's incursion into Cambodia. The young Black man permitting himself to be crucified, allowing his pride and the pride of all other Black men to be amplified, holding his holy rage deep inside, both perfectly fit and unfit to be tied. Anguish he was after, performance art, like Jesus on the stark hillside of Calvary. Anguish on that blazing hot day with graves opening wide, and Judas, poor saint that he was, hanging himself for allowing deicide. How are you still in my heart all these years, you who well may have died by now? How to hold your wild courage, how to carry you down from that hill. I am ill at these numbers, Hamlet sighed. I'm beaten, dry-eyed. I can feel the chill.
Mm.
I am looking forward to the seventh book.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
I would like to say I wasn't reading very well, couldn't see very well, and I just want to go back to that long sentence I wrote that talked about John's poems filled with breathlessly long lines that may obscure but not hide ingenious rhymes. Absurdly funny puns, outrageously long titles. You've outdone yourself. And a continuous mashup of contemporary events and situations, small and large, with centuries hopping literary and historical references.
So sweet.
Thank you.
Nice.
So tonight we are, among other things, celebrating the very recent publication of Jennifer Martelli's fourth full-length collection, Psychic Party Under the Bottle Tree, published
Oh, nice.
just last month by Lily Poetry. This is Jan's fourth full-length collection following two books which were chosen as must-reads by the Massachusetts Center for the Book and won other recognitions as well. She's also published 4 chapbooks and is one of the editors of Mom Egg Review. Jennifer has perhaps been best known for her strong political voice in her poems, skillfully weaving her very personal history with the very public history of Kitty Genovese, whose murder was famously witnessed by many people in My Tarantella, or with Geraldine Ferraro, our first female vice presidential candidate in Queen of Queens. Martelli has pulled no punches in addressing the misogyny inherent in our political and social situation, along the way addressing the Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. The new book is more inward-looking, but expansive in ways that both deepen and widen the emotional territory. The poems may start with a domestic detail, or a memory, or dream, something seen, remembered, read. But before it's over, the poem will make associative leaps that bring a number of things together, adding surprising facts and traces of an abandoned religion, forcing us to make connections. The no-punches strength of the previous books is here inhabited by a self that conveys strength through vulnerability. Quote, I fear suffocation and I fear snakes, the book begins. And there are other fears and other snakes. But the snakes weave their way through the varied territory of the book, defining technique as well as content, confronting and vanquishing fear and sadness with the sheer delight of language.
Oh my gosh, I just want you to stay up here and talk about my book and I would actually read. That was so great. That was so wonderful. Thank you so much. And James, thank you again for having me at Grolier. And John, I've never gotten teary by just a poem title. So that was beautiful. I'm really happy to read with you and Kevin. This will be a treat. So yeah, this new book is probably my least political book that I'll ever write. Though, you know how long sometimes it takes, from acceptance of a manuscript to it actually coming out. So a lot of these poems were written, and I hate saying this term, during the first Trump administration. And that weaves its way through the sadness that that Martha was talking about. The first 3 poems I'm going to read are really part of a series. A while back, Liz Bradfield at Broadsided Press posted I guess you'd call it an invented form. And I'm not going to go into the whole thing because there are so many moving parts, but you have to describe an everyday object. You have to talk about its roots, its etymology, and then you have to have a quote from some other book. So I love crossword puzzles and I love putting things together. So this was a challenge I really wanted to take. So again, this is part of a series. A couple of those poems are in a previous book too. So the first one is The Lens. And I chose this one because it's customary in some Italian cultures to make a big pot of lentil soup on January 1st. The lens. In the pocket of my cotton apron, a loose lens from an old pair of glasses, cool as a beach stone and as smooth, it fit in my palm, magnified my lifeline, my heartline, focused my future. My eyes don't constrict tight as a cervix anymore. What else can't I see? From my kitchen window, January 1st looks like any other Sunday, but there are trees lying on the sidewalk. There's silver tinsel. I'm simmering a pot of lentils for luck. Lentils because they look like coins. Lentils weeping with sweet onions and garlic cloves peeled off their bulbs. I can see the root of lentil seed, lensis, convex as a lens and green until boiled down. She is old, old, old. She must live another year, and she knows it. I can barely see into the pot to stir the soup. It's steaming with seed and the most savory, sweet heat. And that quote on the old, old, old is from Sylvia Plath's The Bee Meeting. The chain. Tucked in the toe of an old sock, my lost silver chain lies curled and knotted too tight to fit around my neck, even as a choker, some links broken like an old snake's cervical bones. Once I wore it strung with the silver charm, a horn that fell to my throat's hollow, kept away the curse of eyes and of envy. Today is the coldest day so far this year. I've hung straw crosses from the back door posts for St. Bridget, patron saint of abortions and things thawing, deep dirt pockets of animals and roots, snakes and last year's roses, sleeping voles. I can unknot this chain with two sharp common pins, pick the tiny locked spine, loosen all the archaic root words of Shan, links of precious metals or of iron, to twist, to twine, to hunt, to snare. Jealousy can open the blood. It can make black roses. I can wound badly, and I have. Today, I enter my daughter's birth month and my own. You are metal, my chart says. You attract and you orbit. Beware toxic loops. And the beautiful quote about jealousy is another Plath quote from The Swarm. And the last line is I stole from the Boston Globe's horoscopes. I started subscribing again to the Globe when Maura Healey was elected governor. And I say this all the time, but it's true. I forgot how much I missed those little horoscopes with the little rules they give you. And the last of this series is the Coleus. And just, I want to let you know there's a really bad swear in here, but it's kind of fitting. It's not gratuitous. The Coleus on Good Friday. Member of the mint family, fleshy stemmed, tough as a fist and thick. Those bushy, hairy leaves left in the sun turn purple, make a shallow cleft, a warm cunt. God, one gift would have been enough, but he didn't stop. Out the window, I can see where the lilies lie awake under the thawed earth in my yard. The roots of the word coleus, sheath, male part fused tight into a fat stamen, power to stand, stamina, the warp of an upright loom in ancient Rome. I should mourn and contemplate the slow death of a man on a cross this first mild afternoon. I should water and dust this unwanted gift, move the tin pot around the room for light. And the quote I took was from Rachel Menny's April 18th, 2017. It's a fantastic book, by the way, the Naomi letters. They're beautiful. So I took that from there. I know you're not supposed to use cicadas in a poem. This has a cicada in it. But again, not on purpose, not to be precious. This poem is written really in sentences and there's spaces in between. And I'll pause in between each one. Oh, Lloyd. Saturday, awake to the raw April outside. A dream that was on my tongue is gone with the swallow. Blue light from the TV from my phone. Doctors say blue light interrupts the circadian system, plays a role in heart disease, cognitive dysfunctions. One day, my mother couldn't remember the steps in making her bed. Which came first, the spread or the top sheet? I was impatient, had never seen dementia. This was before I started falling asleep with the TV on, or maybe not. When I read circadian, I hear cicada, the cicada rhythm. This is what happens in the spring once we pass the equinox. One day it's light at 7 o'clock. And look, the maples have budded, the forsythia. One day, a sculptor mathematician discovered a new shape he called the oloid. One day, the oloid didn't exist. Next day, it did, like a death reversed. Julie Chen, poet-artist, in her visual project, cut this shape out with a laser, splayed it on a table, folded it into a chrysalis. If I believed in angels, I'd say a two-dimensional oloid looks like an angel or a winged thing. I watched Chen's process in bed, cocooned on my phone. Beyond me, the TV is on mute, a French movie about the undead. The window is above the TV, then the maples, then the world. One day, let me wake and feel different than I have my whole life. Chen wrote, it is the relationship of the circles that creates the shape. The heart of the chrysalis, of the cicada, of the circadian rhythm is a bisected, symmetrical thing. The spine of a book broke open, dividing the coherent past from the incomprehensible present. All night and into the shock of day, I can hear things, wings, a humming outside, the start of rain. So years ago, we lived just a few blocks down on Kennard Street, and we were there for most early 90s to mid 90s when I had my daughter. So we moved out in 96. And I'm not making fun of myself or anything that was going on in the 90s, but there was a big belief in angels. They were very popular. You know, everybody talked about angels and angels. And I took it very seriously. And I actually look back and I cringe. And I used to read Rilke to people, like I make them listen to me. That sounds so profound. When I think about it, it's awful. I feel like I have to call people and apologize. So, and I also want to say I'm very proud of this. This is one of two poems in this book that feature John Travolta. So, Rilke. Long ago, my dinner plates were thick glass that shone green in a certain light. They were fired with white spirals like frost across a windshield. I forced my friends to listen to me at my kitchen. I'm sorry, I'm just laughing at myself. I forced my friends to listen to me at my kitchen table, made longer with fold-out wings. I read Rilke's poem about the angel who wrestles Jacob until he lay sore still. Back then, we had angels like John Travolta and Nick Cage, wings furled under trench coats. These angels smoked, went into heat, fell in love, fell spinning from heaven, left swirls of feathers. They envied us with all our hungers, our death. We wanted to believe that our suffering was enviable, graceful, necessary. I served my friends cold grapes, raw fish, pepper salad, read my Rilke. I can't remember which translation, though. Bly's. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. Or Snow's. His growth is to be deeply defeated by ever greater beings. I can't speak for fidelity to another language or another life. Fall lasts long past the equinox. It spirals out into the night. I should have said that this was a sonnet, and each line had 17 syllables, which is kind of fun to do. So I'm really interested in the Welsh language. I love how it looks. It looks like there's only Y and L, and it's beautiful though. When you hear it, it sounds German, but with English in it. So I'm going to mangle the little Welsh that's in this poem. A lot of this in this book, deals with atheism, but not so much. I mean, I don't care about Catholicism, but just being in recovery to say, to be an atheist is sometimes an odd contradiction. Bisid e cum, foxglove. Do you too live an unprayerful life? Are you afraid of it too, this ungod? I'd like to travel to Wales, learn that almost outlawed tongue of unvowels, the Y that hangs below the line. There is a house called Tai Bywyd, Life House, that grows out of a green meadow. Would I call it brutalist with its brick and glass? Yes, it is brutal. I know this house from a movie set, its clean halls, its heart, and it has one, bricked and buried under a gentle rise. Is your atheism the same as mine, shamed and afraid? Rules governing the letter Y are some of the most confusing in Welsh, can sound like my eat, like my cut. In my brick heart of American hearts, something moves to the edge, is built beneath a field of foxglove. And just two short ones. As I said, a lot of these poems were written during Trump's first administration. The title of this poem was my misreading of a friend's Facebook post. Yesterday, I dug my sadnesses out of their storage boxes, and today it snowed. She meant to say sundresses, and I read sadnesses. Think about it. Sarin gas dropped on a Syrian city. Think about it. I was breathing then. I am breathing now. Maybe I was watching April, the giraffe in labor, in a special pen, away from the father, her man who wants only to kill their child. April, all long legs and russet spots holding up that belly. Even April can breathe. Or maybe I'm just watching a hoax. I'm watching Eveline, the gold feral cat, laboring too. Skinny, wretched thing, warm now, she spreads her hind legs, licks the canal to heal the hurt with her wet scent. Think about breathing. Think about it. Think of all the videos of animals in labor. Think about how still and big eyes get in pain. That center of dark grows and grows and grows. So I just want to make a point about Dick Cheney. It's my last poem. This just shows how far I've been pulled. He did a commercial for his daughter, Liz, when she was running for re-election. And I remember watching, I'm like, what a sweet old guy he is. Dick, and that's what's happened, my compass is completely off. So this was written before all that, when he was still Dick Cheney, right? Watching a reenactment of Dick Cheney's heart transplant. There is that moment when neither has a heart, The brain dead boy lying on the table with his chest cracked open. The old man with a fist-sized hole who will never know gratitude. The good heart is handed surgeon to surgeon and hovers. So there's a moment, much like when Sisyphus gets his stone to the top of the mountain and stands on the flatland, pushing nothing. He doesn't know what to do with his arms, which won't lower. Much like that moment just after the last line of cocaine is inhaled, the mirror licked clean, moment of emptiness. And I'd say, I'm okay. I've got everything I'd ever need or want. Even the monotonous rotation of the earth of small moons around outer planets stops and a window cracks open, letting in a strange thaw in the winter. The surgeons plant a purple heart deep in old soil, and it beats and beats and beats. Thank you.
And that's her least political.
I know. The least one.
Jennifer.
Thanks, Ma.
I met Kevin Prufer a long time ago, somewhere around the time I met John Hodgen. He was a graduate student at Washington University at the time, but the next thing I knew, he was teaching and serving as an editor of Pleiades magazine, and I should say, giving new life to that publication. Since then, he's moved on to the University of Houston, where he currently directs the creative writing program, and also to the Leslie MFA program, which is what brings him to us today. Since I met him all those years ago, he's published 9 books of poetry, edited or co-edited 11 books, just counted, and most recently published a very fine novel. He's won more awards than I can possibly list, including fellowships from the NEA and the Lannan Foundation, and his books of poems regularly appear on Best Poetry Books of the Year lists. The book we'll be featuring tonight, The Fears, won the prestigious Rilke Prize and an award from the Texas Institute of Letters, and it's a stunning one. Kevin has been creating collages of classical and contemporary narratives of American life for many years, but the territory of his recent poems has both expanded and deepened. He's increasingly concerned with the nature of narrative, and his exploration of it is edgy, smart, and profound. Fusing apparently accessible storylines that are both personal and political with Greek and Roman history, the poems create often unsettling juxtapositions between past and present, violence and tenderness, intimacy and distance. The Fears is his most sustained and profound book, a meditation on loss and mortality that honors even as it questions the stories it tells. Please welcome Kevin.
Thanks. It's really delightful to read at the Grolier, where I've been coming since I was about 18, I think. I think I used to take buses in from Connecticut when I was an undergrad and hang out here. That sounds right. I'm turning you all invisible with my reading glasses. And thank you, Martha, one of my best friends in the world. I was reading about, or thinking about in Greek tragedies, about what sort of compels the narrative forward in so many of them. And I was deciding that in so many cases, what pushes the narrative is this idea that something is not where it should be, that things are displaced, and that things can get better when the placement becomes appropriate. So that was, if you think like, what is the seed that makes the poem grow? It was sort of thinking about that one day. The poem is called A Dog Barking into the Night. Creon's error is remarkable when viewed as confusion about the proper placement of the living and the dead. For Antigone, whom he seals in a cave, is a vital young woman, and so she belongs in the sun. It is her brother, already dead on the sunlit battlefield, who requires a tomb. It makes sense, therefore, that Antigone hangs herself, death being the circumstance her placement demands. Thus, Creon creates from nothing a situation that requires two tombs. It's like the saddest time of my life. Let me explain. One evening, years ago in Cleveland, my brother and I stood on his front porch smoking. Our father was in the hospital, dying. All night long, a chained dog whimpered into the frozen night. It isn't right, my brother said, to keep a dog chained up like that. I nodded and took another drag, smoke filling my lungs as a thought might fill the mind, and then we went inside. The next morning, as I got in my car ready to drive to the hospital, I found that dog frozen by the chain link fence. Snow had crusted over his chain. It wasn't right, of course. The dog belonged inside. It was an error of placement. My father wasting away in his hospital bed. At that point in his illness, he became an animal too. His hands, I'm not kidding, looked like claws curved around the remote control. I will not forget how, because he could not get out of bed and the nurses had grown complacent, I held his cock in my hand while he pissed into a dirty drinking glass. Thank you, he said when he was through. And in that moment, I could not remember him the way I knew he'd once been, a man, a human being, more than the accumulation of the failures of a dying animal body. Hospitals do this to you, the rattle of pill carts, the nurses and their iPads. I was teaching a class on Greek drama and had come to that point in Antigone where Creon realizes his error, where, too late, he corrects his mistake, burying Antigone's brother properly. By then, she has hanged herself, making her placement in the cave abruptly perfect. I had wanted a happier ending for my father, sitting by his bedside making notes in the margins of my book. At the back of the cancer ward, the private elevator was large enough for a gurney. I imagined it went right down a dark throat to a basement. I held his claw and I read. Soon my brother would visit, still angry about his neighbor's dog. When the nurse asked if we needed anything, I didn't even look up from my book. No, I told her. My father was asleep. The dog was dead. Antigone was a beautiful 15-year-old girl. And then she was, like her brother, like all of us, eventually, nowhere. I'm just reading these in order. This is the second poem in the book. It's called The Body of Work. One comes eventually to the realization that one will leave behind only a body of work that will grow increasingly unintelligible to each new generation. A trace will remain spread across the vast internet, much the way certain particles inhabit the emptiness of deep space, negligibly, though perhaps measurably. I, for instance, am childless and therefore most likely will die alone, my nest feathered with yellowing poems. One comes eventually to the knowledge that one's children are increasingly unintelligible, being yellowing poems spread across the emptiness of deep space, negligible though they once seemed in their way to breathe. For instance, I am alive, right here in the middle of my poem, having had perhaps too much to drink. One comes eventually to the certainty that one's body of work is nothing like another man's progeny being made of language, which can only veer toward emptiness as years become deep space. For instance, hello, I am calling out to you, folded here between the pages of generations. You don't know me, but once I was particulate and alive. Now what am I? This is a shorter one. It's just called Condominiums. What inspired the Emperor Constantine to murder his own son and later to have his name erased from monuments? No one knows. Nevertheless, Constantine was a benevolent ruler, if you can believe church historians. Late last night, walking through the contagious city, I came upon my demolished high school. Just like that, they'd torn it down, barbarians. Once I'd sat in a tight desk while an old nun lied about American history. Now it was a pile of brick and glass. A yellow bulldozer dozed in the corner, a fat tyrant. The rumble of commerce was continuous from the nearby highway. How I love you, America. You are so forgetful. Constantine ruled for decades after his forgotten son's demise and died happy in Nicomedia. We should murder history to make room for history. No, I told myself, for truth. No, condominiums. I have these, I'm just gonna read two more poems because they're both kind of jangly story poems. And I have this thing, I put, I don't know if you've ever seen these poems, but I put little plus signs between sections. I have this idea that every section is sort of in addition to the previous section with an invisible equal sign at the end of the poem. I started doing it because it helped me write. You know, I'd get to a point and I'd think, what the hell? What's next? And I just put a little plus sign. So I'd think, well, the plus sign will help me know what's next. And then I just started keeping them in. So I don't know how to do a plus sign. I won't try. I'll just pause. This poem is called A Distant Row of Black Pines. I'm going to read this and then read one new one. When he was very drunk, my father told me how he had held another man's head underwater until that man's entire body shuddered and relaxed and only his leg twitched on the muddy river bank. Anyway, he said, it was a long time ago. Time passes. That's the thing about time. The bar was nearly empty. For a long while, he looked into the glittering rows of bottles. Drink up, he said at last, fishing in his pocket for his keys. Drink up. Is your fingernail part of your body? The professor asked, pretending to examine the back of her perfectly manicured hand. What about when you trim your fingernails? Are the clippings part of your body? I was watching very closely as a fat black ant crawled across my open textbook. What if they're false fingernails? What if your hand is prosthetic? Are they part of you? Are the microorganisms in your gut? What I'm trying to say, she said, is that the borders of your body are not clear. What I'm trying to say is that the moon is certainly not your body, but that cell phone you're holding is perhaps as much a part of your body as your fingernails. And so she went on until class ended and I closed my textbook over the body of the ant. There in the lecture hall, my mind held an image of the moon, but the moon kept flickering. It would not hold its place. It became something else, a white face in a receding patrol car window, I remembered. The moon, it turned out, was not a part of my body, though I could hold it in my thoughts before it shifted, though its likeness filled my mind. As mist might have filled a distant forest one evening years ago, my father rising from that riverbank and disappearing finally into the black pines. The mind rests there at the riverbank, where that body, it had been, in fact, a soldier, has just stopped twitching. Or at that moment when the professor told us our bodies are merely relational, that they don't exist beyond their relations. In the same way that car refers only to a complex relationship between wheels, bumpers, engine, etc. She was a thin woman, about 40, black hair, bright red fingernails, and lipstick. My eyes lingered on her body as she spoke. Your mother, my father said, is not going to be happy with us, as he pulled from the parking lot into the street. The sodium lights glittered. It had begun to rain. I'm sorry about what I said back there. It was all bullshit. And he laughed. I never killed anybody. The road was long and black. He was talking about other things now, some whore he met in Frankfurt long before I knew your mother. Best part of the war. The image of fingernail clippings drifting to the floor, the click of her heels as she walked from the podium, a rustling of knapsacks. My father didn't notice, at first, the blue lights, the siren behind us. Come on, he told the cop who escorted him to the patrol car. I had 2 drinks. The cop, surprisingly gentle, cuffed him and led him away from me. And then she was helping my father's heavy body into the back seat and closing the car door. His moon-like face pressed now to the window, his breath fogging the glass. An image that returns to me frequently, that police car, pulling into the bodiless night, receding while I stood for a moment at the edge of the windy highway, and a distant row of black pines swayed like a chorus. I'm just reading this one last one. Do you ever this experience? I'm assuming like 80% of the people in the room write poetry, right? Where you're digging around and you find a fragment of like something in a desk drawer and you think, that's really good. Did I write that?
Yeah.
But you don't know, right? So that happened to me. I was digging around in my drawer and I found this, like these several stanzas that I had no memory of having written them. So I didn't know whether I was being narcissistic when I said, wow, those are good. Because I don't know. So this poem begins with a long quote. I'm just gonna go like that.
Yeah.
So because I'm quoting the fragment I found that I later learned I did write. So the poem's called Memory.
Can you imagine if you didn't?
If you wrote it. Memory. In the end, she forgot everything except how to play piano. The nurse sat her at the keyboard and she played for all the residents in the recreation area. But when it was time to stop, she couldn't remember where she was and became afraid. Sometimes art finds a way to preserve the pleasures of consciousness, but more often it's the same bars of Chopin over and over until the mind is dust. Is a fragment of a poem I found in the back of my desk drawer. Had I written it? I must have written it because it was about my grandmother. But I don't remember writing it. Down the block, the high school is letting out. I can hear the school bell chiming, and the revving of those lunatic engines that have idled too long beneath dying oaks. And I think of Tommy driving fast down the back streets of Cleveland, and all I can do is hold onto my seat and close my eyes while the music plays loud and Tommy shouts, "Fuck yeah," speeding past the garbage cans that line Lee Road. I like to think my youth lives inside me as memory lives inside time. Wayne, sipping his Diet Coke one rainy afternoon in the university parking lot, told me poetry is a kind of memory, is a way the soon to be dead can talk to the not yet born. Just then, a black chasm opened in the asphalt, and I fell into it. Down, down toward the hot and glistening center of the earth. And I've been falling for decades now into memory and fire and the deep subterranean caverns, the steaming lakes far below the rumpled crust of the slowly rotating plastic brain at the Science Museum. Its pink folds glowing as it turns on its platform, while my grandmother looks at her watch and says, "Kiddo, it's time we got you back home, time we got you back for dinner." Those snowy Cleveland weekend afternoons when things were bad at home and she drove me to the museum to see the fossil trilobites and the dinosaurs and that model brain that glowed when I pressed the buttons, hippocampus, amygdala, prefrontal cortex, pink and yellow lights until dinner, and the quiet remonstrances that went with it. Tommy these days is also dead. He drove right out of this poem into an embankment near Fort Bend. Now he's circling the moon like glittering dust, or so I like to think. I want to live forever inside my poems. Anyway, this fragment I found crushed in the back of my desk drawer. She panicked because where was she? Where was she? She didn't know. And when she looked at me, I was no one she could recognize. She shrugged my hand off her impossibly thin shoulder until the nurses soothed her and led her to her silent room. I never finished writing that poem about her because it was too sad, and none of it was helpful to anyone.
Wow.
Thank you to Martha for those terrific introductions. Let's give you a round of applause. Thank you for curating this evening. Thank you to the three poets who read this evening. This was a wonderful way to start 2025. And thank you to all of you who attended this very packed Grolier. If everyone could please put your chairs up against one of the walls. We have books for sale. Poets will be signing books. Thank you for coming tonight. I get a photo of the floor here?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So I was able to navigate.
Yeah. It's gonna take one too, so I'll have one.
Excellent.
We going back here or?
Let's go back here.
Okay.
I can't believe this thing still fit in here.
They never have.
Oh, thank you. I would have forgotten for sure.
I took your picture. You read it. I'm gonna send it to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Like,
good.
yeah, I'd love to read it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Ask you about my kids.
I can take it.
You know about my kids.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not.
You guys mind jumping back here for a quick photo?
Oh, sure.
Great reading.
Thank you.
Hey, let's make it happen.
I was nervous.
Yeah. John, can I borrow you for a sec?
Oh, please.
Right here. I'll take it. How do I get out of the way?
Why don't you come over here? Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's fine. No, fine.
Okay. No, it's all good. Why don't you step back there? That way.
Alright.
Take a photo.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna do one of the three of you first. That's a photo. Martha, get in there.
Take this one and then you can take one with me.
Okay, all right, here we are. There, beautiful. Okay, stare at this one first. Jump in now, stare here. Great,
I look
okay,
great. Thank you.
let's do one with yours.
Yeah.
You wanna jump in?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Oh, it's.
Okay. No, us. Okay, I can get one with you. You want us to take one with your camera? Okay, this is for Martha. Great. Great. You wanna jump in?
Yeah.
Okay, come on in. Okay. You did that one, perfect. Excellent, you're welcome. Okay, this one's from Martha. And now from me. The Grolier archives. Excellent, thank you. This was great. Yes. Okay.
Sign those things.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Okay.